Hello and welcome to the Calisthenics YouTube channel. Today we will talk about the handstand push-up. The handstand push-up is an impressive skill and one of the first and most common goals in calisthenics. We have taught over 70 handstand push-ups from the ground up in the last 6 years. As per usual, we will use our clients to show their zero to hero journey, the methods used, the reasoning behind them, and the most common mistakes we find. At the end of the video, you will even get a full journey roadmap. Defining the handstand push-up. The handstand push-up is a bent arm pushing exercise that mainly involves the front delts, the tricep, and the traps. Depending on where in the pushing phase you are, your front delts, your triceps, or your traps will do the heavy lift. Grip width and hand positioning can further emphasize the individual muscles, allowing us to get a more efficient handstand push-up or to specifically work on our weak points. Strength is just one part of the equation to get your first handstand push-up. And this is where things get complicated. If you can't hold the handstand, you obviously won't be able to handstand push-up. While the strength part of things is mostly linear, the balance part isn't. This makes the time frame in which people reach the handstand push-up very varied. Anything from 6 months to a few years is what you will need to get it. Usually, people that have a hard time balancing and learning the handstand will also struggle in balancing the handstand push-up, making the journey longer. This doesn't mean that you need to handstand before you can start working on handstand push-ups. These two things can be done in parallel. Starting point. We will show you the work done for 3 different starting points. Number 1 is Iris. She has a handstand but a hard time balancing and little shoulder strength. Number 2, Danielle. No handstand, decent shoulder strength. Danielle has limited time available to train. Number 3, Raphael. Beautiful handstand, no handstand push-up. If he tries it, he has a big banana when doing it. No matter the level, the first step will always be testing the athlete's current capabilities. Depending on the level of the athlete, the time available, as well as what has been working on the last months or years, the tests will look different. In Iris's case, we will look at her handstand kick-ups, her handstand starting from belly to wall, 8 rep max of neutral grip dumbbell military press to build a good base for good pikes. And we will test pikes on low P-bars since she has wrist pain when doing them on the floor for maximal reps. After seeing Iris's tests, we decided to implement lots of from belly to wall handstand work to get more calm and confident in the handstand. Kick-up work with short holds was implemented as well. Doing breathing exercises before handstands actually helped her a lot to stay calmer. Since her path on pikes was completely off, only singles to doubles for multiple sets were implemented to learn the path with enough margin to almost be considered as technical work. Most of the work was done with dumbbell military presses at high rep ranges and volumes to build bigger and stronger front delts. Since there was time available, further isolation work for tricep was implemented as well in order to gain some good muscle. This contractive tissue will later be taught to specifically perform pikes and handstand push-ups. In Danielle's case, we will look at belly to wall handstand form plus max hold and a 6 rep max of full ROM pike push-ups. Seeing these tests, it's clear that we can implement full ROM pike push-ups already with a bottom pause to focus on path and end position. Programmed twice a week with 3 to 4 sets per session in a 6 to 4 rep range to have an undulating scheme. This has shown to yield greater results than simple linear progressions and makes sense here, allowing us to work in a lower rep range on one day, which is specific to the handstand push-up. The first handstand push-up can be considered a 1 RM, while creating more work capacity on the first of the 2 days. For the handstands, we will implement some corrective work, elevation, depression, as well as PPT to APT for now, because his shoulders are very closed. Stretches for his lats and dislocate will be implemented as well. In many cases, just learning to elevate and depress your shoulders correctly while pushing through the traps will fix most of the bad handstand lines. Of course, in some cases, like this one, additional work is needed. In Raphael's case, spending time on the handstand is a waste. It's beautiful and extremely solid. we will test handstand push-up eccentrics, handstand push-ups belly to wall for maximum reps, and we will test a lot of specific tricep work. Raphael weighs around 90 kgs. Handstand push-ups aren't an easy feat at this weight. While technique and balance-wise, Raphael was already at a very good point, handstand push-ups weren't possible without an extreme banana or not possible at all. Primary goal here is to keep getting more confident, especially with the lower part of the handstand push-up, and add some mass to the lacking triceps. Especially in athletes that tend to banana a bit later in the rep, the triceps is often the breaking point and needs to be worked on specifically. This can be done with typical bodybuilding exercises like tricep extensions, skull crushers, etc. in higher rep ranges, or with pike push-ups, military press variations, and with back-to-wall handstand push-ups. As always, we don't want to throw everything into the plan at once. Variation is an extremely useful tool to use when we stagnate. Raphael will find all these variations in his plans in the coming years. Beautiful. Time to grab a coffee. Now that we have a good starting point for each and every one of our clients, we will take a closer look at the programming and give a little overview of how the clients evolved over the years, focusing on a few big events that occurred. In the first months for Iris, we focused, as mentioned, on hypertrophy, building up some quality mass and stronger shoulders. Her pike push-ups were kept singles, doubles, for multiple sets, since she struggled with path and setup a lot. Over the months, her handstand slowly but surely got more stable. Training was split up in 4 days a week, with 2 days focused more on planche, front lever work, plus assistance, and 2 days where we focus more on shoulder plus shoulder tricep assistance. Once a standard level of strength was there, we moved on to multiple reps in the pike push-ups until we reached 6 to 8 reps. At that point, we started loading them. We tested the first 3 negative handstand push-ups. Given Iris's struggle to stay calm in the handstand, we knew a lot of work was needed here. We pushed eccentrics up to 8 sets per session twice a week and implemented back-to-back eccentrics before even thinking of trying the first handstand push-up. This is usually not needed. Once the eccentric doubles got very solid and the pike push-ups reached a good base strength, triples, quadruples with 10 kgs in her case, we tested the first handstand push-up. Seeing that the strength was clearly there and just practice was needed, we integrated it into the plan. Given the fact that we have been using pikes for months at this point, we integrated belly-to-wall handstand push-ups in the plan. Not to do a lot of volume, but rather to understand hip positioning in the concentric part of the movement. As a general rule, we rarely push the 3+ reps here and see it as a technical progression. Iris responded super well to these changes. Getting consistent handstand push-ups was a big struggle for her, but they got better with time. Here we can see her best double ever. Once consistent P-bar handstand push-ups were reached, full ROM work started, both in elevated push-ups, full ROM, and free eccentrics to get user to the deeper range of motion. Iris's journey saw a lot of phases where we had to put a lot of emphasis on balance and hypertrophy, making it more particular. Daniel's handstand push-up journey is one of the most straightforward you can find. So straightforward, it can be turned into a magic secret influencer reel. So let's go. Step 1. Daniel learned to elevate his shoulders and what PPT in the handstand meant. Step 2. He managed to balance the handstand, starting from belly to wall. Step 3. Happening together with step 1 and step 2. Paused. Elevated feet, full ROM pike push-ups was the only strength progression Daniel needed. As mentioned before, a 6-4 and the next meso a 4-2 and in the last meso a 2-1 rep range. Adding 2.5 kgs on both days every week through all these 3 mesocycles, almost in a linear fashion. Step 4. Handstands are solid after just 2 months. First handstand push-up eccentric test. Step 5. Once the eccentrics were solid, it took a whole 4 weeks plus minus. We simply said, okay, now push up End of story. Actually, there was a step 6, full ROM handstand push-up. We exchanged full ROM pikes, which he now did with over 20 kgs with military press to allow for a more hassle-free progression. And right now we're close to the 90-degree handstand push-up. Now we finally see Daniel struggle. Leaning forward isn't his strong suit. The more people you train, the more you will notice how big of a role genetics play. Well, this could be an easy to sell straightforward tutorial to get your first handstand push-up. The reality is much more complicated, as we have seen in Iris's case, and we will see now in Raphael's. What is most interesting in Raphael's journey compared to the other two is the very specific compensation mechanism we can find in his handstand push-up. The forearm index centric is perfectly clean. The handstand is gorgeous, zero problems with balance. His shoulder strength is very decent and he's gotten very strong over the years. Here is one of his last straddle planches at 90 kgs. The missing link here is mostly the triceps, or more specifically, the spot where the front delt can't help anymore, but the tricep has to do the heavy lifting. Over the years, we went from normal handstand push-ups to deep handstand push-up, and are now currently working on deep handstand push-up in combination with 90-degree handstand push-ups. Over time, the amount of work done in handstand push-ups hasn't changed much, and has always been relatively high, 10 to 16 plus sets per week, in order to have a lot of specific work. What was always periodically changed is the tricep specific work. The two variations that have brought the most progress in his case were extremely heavy, full ROM, weighted pike push-ups in the 1 to 3 rep range, really focusing on zero compensation, as well as heavy military presses with pauses at the forehead, combined with isolated work, being pushdowns and extensions. Lately, back to wall handstand push-ups are finding their way into our clients' plans again as well, because they constitute an extremely good tricep exercise and allow for good loading possibilities. These 3 journeys should give you a general idea of how different the path to reaching the handstand push-up can be. Now, we will talk about some other very common mistakes we find in many athletes attempting the handstand push-up. First of all, the lean. When approaching the handstand push-up, many fail already when initiating the movement. What is extremely important here is to understand how to switch from elevation to depression while slightly leaning, almost planching forward, while sinking the feet at the same time. Many try to keep the heels over the body when initiating the handstand push-up. This will lead to arching, opening the chest towards the floor. Instead, we want to keep a neutral chest, some even a rather closed chest, depending on individual anatomy, and put the body diagonally, making for a greater surface area to balance this way. Along with the triceps banana, there is the complete handstand push-up banana as well. This often happens because we open our chest at the bottom of the movement to help ourselves with the chest to get out of the hole. Opening the chest will lead to arching. Because of that, we will have to bring our heels towards the center of gravity, making the rep easier, since it will rather be a bench press than a handstand push-up. More shoulder strength. The right scapular setting, for some even slightly protracted with a good tension in the lats, will do the job here. This is how most handstand push-ups will look like in the beginning, and that's okay. We need to explore the range of motion and get comfortable with it before we can even make any adjustments here. As stated earlier, the handstand push-up is just as much balance as strength, and balance is unattainable without attempts. Next one, forgetting to bring the chest in. A mistake that is very evident in athletes with good overhead mobility and nice handstands, and less noticeable in most calisthenics, aka shit mobility handstands like mine, since they don't know how to elevate and push their chest in the first place. Bringing the chest in at the end of the concentric will actually take off some stress from the shoulders and use the traps more, making for an elegant closing into a nice handstand push-up. This can be trained very specifically in elevated pike push-ups by thinking about pushing the chest towards the box at the end of the movement. Now that most mistakes have been covered, let's take a look at a nice roadmap for your first handstand push-up. As stated earlier, time frames differ so strongly from person to person that we won't make false promises. Enjoy the journey. It's a beautiful skill to work on and achievable for most people. The skill tree to the handstand push-up. First of all, we will have to get confident with handstands. Usually 10 to 15 seconds are a good starting point. More is better. At the same time, we will have to work on the strength side of things. First of all, with push-ups and neutral dumbbell presses or other military press variations. Once these are good, we can switch to pike push-ups in a normal range of motion. We can elevate our feet to make it harder, and later on we can switch to full ROMs. Before we switch to the full ROMs, we usually go and do some weighted pike push-ups. We get strong in the first part of the range of motion, and later, once we got the full ROMs down, we can start loading those as well. If the handstands are extremely stable and we have enough strength in our shoulders, we can test the free handstand push-up eccentrics. First of all, just by doing slow negatives in 6 seconds or so. We keep working on our weighted full ROM pike push-ups. If these get too hard to load, we can switch to belly to wall, singles to triples. At this point, we can add bottom holds to our eccentrics, doing 6 seconds going down with 2 seconds at the bottom. Now we can probably achieve our first handstand push-ups. Some attempts will be needed here. Once a few reps become solid, we can start doing paused reps. Once paused reps become solid, well, we keep working on pike push-ups in the full range of motion, as well as belly to wall handstand push-ups, maybe in the full range of motion as well if needed. We can attempt our first deep handstand push-up eccentrics. Get familiar with the balance in the last part of the range of motion. Once these are stable, we can get our first deep handstand push-ups and repeat the whole story again. Do multiple reps, paused reps, and learn to lean forward for the 90-degree handstand push-ups. If we haven't done planche work at the same time, especially bent arm planche work, adding some bent arm planche work here makes sense to get comfortable with the bottom position of the 90-degree handstand push-ups. Here, using eccentrics with bottom holds will work wonders as well to understand the path. Once we start pushing up our 90-degree handstand push-ups, we can start thinking of weighted handstand push-ups to make everything more fun and start loading them over time. Now to the question, how often should you train? For most, twice a week, specific work, so pike, military press, and eccentrics is more than enough, paired with 2 to most often 3 sessions of handstands, depending how hard of a time you have with handstands. If you had a really hard time learning handstands, you will probably have a hard time learning the handstand push-up as well. A third technical session for handstand push-up eccentrics or even just bottom holds might be needed. I hope this video was helpful, giving you real training insights from more and less gifted people in different weight ranges and sexes to bring the most realistic tutorial on YouTube regarding the handstand push-up. We're trying to put more effort into YouTube since we think it's the best commonly accessible platform to teach and learn. Help us by subscribing and sharing. See you next time.